Jay-Z and Diddy's accuser was questioned by private investigators. The Jane Doe that just dropped her lawsuit against Jay-Z and Diddy said that she was contacted by private investigators who were intimidating her and terrifying her and asking her to sign an affidavit saying that all of her claims in her lawsuit were a lie after she dismissed this lawsuit against Jay-Z and Diddy. And now Jay-Z submitted affidavits from these private investigators confirming that this woman was approached by these private investigators. All of these affidavits are coming from Jay-Z's extortion case that he filed against Tony Buzbee in California when he got the demand letter from this Jane Doe. This Jane Doe alleged that on Friday, February 21st, she was approached at her home by two individuals, a woman and a large man. They cornered her on her front porch and told her that they were investigators working for the attorney on behalf of Jay-Z. They asked her if she was willing to sign an affidavit stating that her claims in the New York action were false, but she refused. And now, on behalf of Jay-Z, these private investigators submitted affidavits in Jay-Z's case against Tony Buzbee, confirming that they did go question this Jane Doe after her lawsuit was already dropped. But both of the stories are very different, and some of the things that this private investigator is saying really doesn't make sense to me. Now, this is an affidavit from Charlotte Henderson, who said, "I am a licensed private investigator, but I was not hired by Jay-Z or his attorneys to perform the investigation I describe in this declaration." She said on Friday, February 21st, along with investigator James Butler, she met with Jane Doe. This is one big question for me. If you're saying that you were not hired by Jay-Z or his attorneys, why are you going to this Jane Doe's house, and how did you even find out her identity? Pretty sure a private investigator on their own accord isn't just going to jump up and say, "Hey, I'm about to go try to find this Jane Doe," and ask her random questions about the lawsuit, and then Jay-Z is going to somehow know who you are and use your statement in his lawsuit that he filed against Tony Buzbee? And I find this statement very odd, for one, because why would you go question this Jane Doe just randomly on a whim? And also, Jay-Z has used private investigators in the past in 2021. The Rolling Stone did this whole article in 2021 talking about how Jay-Z hired a retired cop to spy on a former perfume executive. And this article said that Jay-Z's legal team hired a retired cop to sniff around the neighborhood of a former president of a perfume company involved in a breach of contract trial that was in New York. He said that she met Jane Doe on the front porch of her home in Alabama, and she confirmed that she was in fact the Jane Doe plaintiff in the lawsuit. Jane Doe appeared calm and at ease, and she maintained a natural demeanor and engaged in conversation freely. Mind you, the Jane Doe is saying something completely different. She said that she asked them to leave her alone because she felt intimidated and terrified at being confronted by these two individuals on her doorstep. She said that they knew her name and her home address despite her being anonymous in the New York lawsuit. After this Jane Doe put her statement in the extortion case that Jay-Z filed against Tony Buzbee, then Jay-Z sued this Jane Doe and Tony Buzbee both in Alabama. In Jay-Z's lawsuit, he admits that he now knows Jane Doe, and he's known Jane Doe since February 21st of 2025. I'll remind you, this is the same exact day that these private investigators that weren't hired by Jay-Z made contact with this Jane Doe. And I always thought that it was really weird how Alex Spiro talked about this Jane Doe's identity after this NBC interview that was on December 13th. Alex Spiro did that press conference, and he tried to show everything in the NBC interview that was false, and he did that 3 days later on December 16th. Listen to how he described this Jane Doe at the time.
Do you know who the Jane Doe is, like her actual identity? Has there been research into that on your end?
Yeah, it's a fair question. Because she's been blacked out in the video, and because a court has not unmasked her in court, I'm not going to get into her identity. You will notice that I did not get into some of her issues. I don't want to. It's really sad in many respects, and I don't want to get into that, so I'm not going to unmask her here today.
This private investigator is alleging that the Jane Doe told her that Jay-Z did not SA her, and that she originally told Tony Buzbee that she had been SA'd by Diddy and a world-renowned female celebrity who is present for the SA, and that Tony Buzbee suggested that she claimed that Mr. Carter was another person. And I found this statement to be odd because I have the original lawsuit that was filed all the way back on October 20th that only named Diddy, but it still had celebrity A and B, but they weren't named yet. Now, this private investigator alleged that the Jane Doe stated that Busby brought Jay-Z into it, and he was the one that kind of pushed her towards going forward with Jay-Z. This private investigator then alleged that this Jane Doe told her that Mr. Busby asked if Jay-Z had been at the party. Jane Doe told Mr. Busby that Jay-Z was at the party, but she told me that Jay-Z did not partake in any essay of Miss Doe. This was another thing that was put into this affidavit because the way that they were explaining it, Jay-Z and Diddy weren't even at the same after party. She then goes on to say that Jane Doe confirmed the following regarding Jay-Z during their interview. But mind you also, guys, there is no transcript, there is no phone call or video proof attached to what this affidavit is. It's only this private investigator's word. And the same thing could also be said with the Jane Doe, but I really don't understand why they are admitting that a private investigator went after this Jane Doe after the lawsuit was dismissed and to ask questions about Jay-Z, but they were not hired by Jay-Z or anybody in his counsel. The private investigator then alleged that she asked these questions to Jane Doe. Jay-Z had nothing to do with this, correct? And she said, right. Other than that, he was at the party that you were at, so I mean, he did not SA you, right? No. He was just there, but he didn't have anything to do with any of the acts towards you. Yeah. She also alleged that Jane Doe told her that the lawyers at Mr. Busby's law firm told her if she pursued Jay-Z, she would get a payout. This private investigator also alleged that the Jane Doe said shortly before Mr. Busby dismissed the lawsuit against Jay-Z, Tony Buzbee allegedly told her that Jay-Z was threatening to off her. And like I said, this private investigator's story is very different than the Jane Doe story that she just said just a couple days ago. She said that she felt intimidated and threatened by these private investigators and that they were allegedly trying to get her to sign an affidavit saying that her claims were false. She also said that they went after her parents and were trying to do the same thing and asking if Tony Buzbee tried to pay them to get them to lie. She said that she actually stands 10 toes down on her claims that she made and she just dropped the lawsuit because she was terrified. Tony Buzbee has been alleging that private investigators have been after him and his former clients for months. Got pictures of these private investigators, and this one right here is very similar to the one that was going around questioning content creators about Diddy months ago. And mind you, Tony Buzbee filed multiple lawsuits against Roc Nation and others on behalf of his former clients who said that they were contacted by these private investigators and offered money to file fake lawsuits against Tony Buzbee. And in these lawsuits, not only did he include transcripts of phone calls, photos, he also has multiple affidavits from these former clients saying what happened to them. This is just one of the many affidavits included in these lawsuits against Roc Nation and others. They said that my husband Robert is a former client of the Busby law firm, and on November 30th of 2024, two men came to my house harassing me and my husband for information about the Busby law firm. These men claimed to be investigating the Busby law firm for fraud and asking prying questions about how we found the Busby law firm and whether we were coerced into having the Busby law firm represent us. On top of the two private investigators that went to her in person, there is also another private investigator who seemed to do some research into this Jane Doe's background. What I found out about him is pretty weird. So he said his name is Ian Pillinger, and he said he's an employee at Guidepost Solutions, LLC, which is licensed to conduct investigations in the state of New York. So you know me, I went and did some digging on this guy, and it says that he is a director in the New York State office for Guidepost Solutions, and he's a former state prosecutor and a federal government official. And it says that his work on the investigation side, that he manages and supports investigations through research, subject and witness interviews, and strategic planning for a wide range of clients, including the top 100 law firms, major international corporations, and high net worth and high profile individuals. And we know that Quinn Emanuel, where Alex Spiro works at, is one of the top law firms, and we also know that Jay-Z is a high profile individual. I don't know, it may just be a coincidence, but that's pretty weird if you ask me. So I'm really wondering if the private investigators were sent by him on behalf of technically somebody else. Because in his affidavit, he does not state that he doesn't work for Jay-Z or Jay-Z's counsel, and he said that he was provided the name of the Jane Doe, the person on behalf of the lawsuit filed in Jane Doe versus Sean Combs. I cannot help but keep finding the connection with New York and these private investigators super weird. So Tony Buzbee, at the same time that he was talking about these private investigators, he found out that this person was a New York private investigation firm calling his former employees of the Busby law firm trying to get information on any negative experience. Tony Buzbee found out that this woman works for a company called Lex Intelligence. And all of this is also included in his multiple lawsuits filed by his former clients. And like I said, all of this is going on in Jay-Z's extortion case that he filed against Tony Buzbee, that the judge just said that he's probably about to dismiss Jay-Z's extortion claim unless he showed evidence. All of this is a lot, and I'm very interested to see if this case is going to make it to the discovery phase, because there is some interesting information coming out in all of this. But y'all let me know what you guys think about all this in the comments.